So I've been asked to walk the talk ever since I was a little baby. But now that I'm in a wheelchair, that's not possible. But if you stay tuned, you will hear from a guest who's going to help us talk the walk.
Disability Life TV is sponsored by Connor Dental Associates.
Hi, my name is Yvette Pegues, and I am your host today for Disability Life TV. Thank you so much for watching. We have a virtual guest today, so don't be alarmed. I know I'm sitting here by myself, but Mr. Rich Luby from Talk the Walk Disability and Inclusion Consulting is actually on the phone, and he's going to explain to you exactly what he does and why you should tune in. Hey, Rich, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Thank you for virtually joining us today. Tell us a little bit about who you are. I know that you're in the northeast part of the country, but I'd like to get to know you as our guests are getting to know you as well. So tell me a little bit about Little Rich and some of the things about your childhood that we'd love to learn more about.
Absolutely. First off, thank you very much for you and your team for having me on and have this opportunity to speak to you.
Pleasure.
Quick introduction. I love how you said Little Rich. So back in the day, I got to revert back to a little kid.
There you go.
Yeah. So I have a personal connection to the disability community, and also a professional connection. My personal connection is I was born with the ability of cerebral palsy at a young age. So growing up with cerebral palsy, going through reconstructive surgeries, physical therapy, things of that nature. It really helped hone and build the man I am today. And I don't know if you noticed I said born with the ability of, because I think,
noticed that.
Yeah, I think that when individuals are born with a disability, we have to sometimes overcome certain barriers, and it helps us develop into a better person. And a lot of times, individual society, a disability is framed as something negative, and I'm looking to showcase the positives, the abilities beyond a disability.
And I love that about you, because our show is spelled with a capital A for that reason. But what you do as a professional, and we'll get to that, does a couple of things. As much as I like to enforce our abilities to be seen from a position of ability, what protects us as people who identify with a specific disability is the word disability. So while I understand in certain contexts, especially when you're raising a young child, it's important to enforce abilities, but also in cases where you're fighting for the ADA and the protection of the government, the word disability is what they understand. So what you do is so important to me, and I find it so amazing that you speak of cerebral palsy very differently than I've had other guests on the show. So if you don't mind taking a few minutes to tell me about this reconstructive surgery and how it is that you are physically different than a large population of people who identify with the very same condition.
Absolutely. Great question. As you know, individuals with cerebral palsy, there are different severities and different cases. For my specific case, it affected my motor skills, my balance, and specifically more the right side of my body. So with mobility and walking, I have a noticeable limp or within my gait.
Okay.
And these reconstructive surgeries were helped to assist in that walking aspect and with my motor skills. So, for example, prior to any surgeries, I was born with my right leg kind of lifted up because of tight hamstrings.
Okay.
And my right leg was also rotated outward, so I almost kind of dragged it along instead of utilizing it as to help me with my balance.
Got it.
So luckily for me, these surgeries helped loosen up those hamstrings, which brought my heel back down to the ground, and then they also derotated my hip.
Wow.
to assist with my walking. And these were surgeries done from ages 7 all the way till about 18 or 19 years old, having updates on these surgeries. Because as you grow, your posture changes and everything changes. You have to keep up with that.
Wow.
And the thing that might set me apart, and I feel as though I'm very lucky because, once again, there's so many different severities of cerebral palsy. I was able to be a little bit more mobile and also a little bit to be able to communicate better and advocate for myself. And seeing so many other cases while in the hospital, while in surgeries, seeing other individuals in similar shoes not be able to do those things,
Right.
I felt like it was a gift, and I needed to be an advocate, not just for myself, but for others.
Oh, I love that about you. Do you self-identify, like in cases where these days you have to fill out an application that says, are you a veteran? Are you disabled? Are you male, female, black, or white? Do you find yourself in situations where you have to self-identify as someone who was born with a condition other than traditional?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question as well. I would say in the past, I would probably be lying to you if it's not in the back of my head to be worried to identify at certain times.
Right.
But as of right now, the way that the employment world is going and starting to realize it still needs to progress, and that's why I'm in this type of field. But identifying with a disability used to be, scary to do because you were afraid of what you were going to be looked at or looked upon. But I think it's actually more of a job security nowadays in some aspects, and I think it needs to be celebrated more because just because you have a disability does not mean you're not able to do things. With reasonable accommodation, you could be just as successful or productive as any other individual. So to answer your question, no, I celebrate it.
And I love that you celebrate it, but you also mentioned something that was really important to our viewers, that under the Americans with Disabilities Act and other similar laws, you do have access to reasonable accommodations. Those are the actual words that are used. So I guess the question to you then is, do you need reasonable accommodations at this point based on your current physical attributes? Or is it something that you bypass because you may not need anything different or special?
So for me personally?
Yes.
So for me personally, no. Within the workforce, I would say no. In the past, I definitely utilized reasonable accommodations. Specifically, kind of going back to my childhood, I really struggled due to my disability with grasping certain concepts and processes within school. I had learning disabilities, specifically within math. So a reasonable accommodation that could be looked back upon was extended time on my test.
Right.
I didn't get any extra help with my test. They allowed me to take the tester at a longer period of time so that my mind could process it at the same rate or speed as any other individual.
And I love that you say that. I do, because a lot of people just assume, since we have reasonable accommodations, or sometimes we go to a different room, let's say, to take a test, or we get assistance, whether it's assistive technology or an individual who's taking our notes, I think the perception is that we have this, I hate to say cheating, but it's like we have this advantage that doesn't use our own intellect, that someone else's intellect is also slipped in there, not just, making up for the physical limitations, but also the intellectual limitations, where in my personal situation, it is about processing. It is about the understanding and getting some things in advance. So can you speak to how that was leveraged, I guess, in your school aged experiences, like I guess K through 12?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, definitely. So, kind of going back to the whole processing circumstances, for my example, when it came to math, I just utilized math because I took so many math classes over and over.
Yeah.
I probably it's kind of comical. I said I went to school so long I should have had a doctorate degree next to my name on rocket scientist. But it was just kind of leveling the playing field. I could get the material. I can gain concepts. I just couldn't get it as quickly. So a great example would be, let's say a teacher asked the question, what's 2 times 2? My mind would say, in a slow motion almost process,
wow,
what's 2 times 2? And I'm still processing it, and people already had their hand raised.
Right.
And my hand was never raised. So they're like, oh, he must not know the answer.
Right.
And in my head, I'm like, I know the answer. I just didn't get it quick enough. So it was things like that, to utilize that time to really just level the playing field and be considered the same, in quotations, as everybody else.
Got it. And so with all these surgeries and processing and placements as a young child, looking back, do you feel like outside of those things you had a very normal and healthy childhood?
Yeah, and that's because of my family. I come from a very large family, very well connected. Actually, just to give you a good visual, I was lucky enough to grow up on my great-grandfather's farm, where the land kind of got divided to family members, so the entire street is all my relatives.
Wow.
So on a holiday, I go left or right, I could walk back home. I'm very lucky in that aspect, and I bring that up because they never looked at me as having a disability. They would put me in scenarios and not allow me to utilize that as a crutch or an excuse.
Right,
Granted, if I needed help, it would be there, but they didn't want me to just be comfortable with utilizing that as an example of why I couldn't attain a certain goal.
And it seems like such a natural setting. So, metropolitan living may cause, you got to worry about sidewalks and all those fun things, but it sounds like you had an amazing childhood. Tell me what part of the country you were raised in.
Yeah, I'm from Connecticut. I'm from New Haven County, just outside of New Haven. If people aren't familiar, I usually say Yale University. I'm
Right.
about 20 minutes from Yale University,
Okay.
in a small country town, and I'm still here.
Wonderful. So how are your winters?
You know what? Normally they're freezing. I'm not going to lie to you; they are not good at all. But last winter, I was actually playing a backyard football game on Christmas in shorts. So,
Wow.
I don't know what's going on. I don't know if global warming, if you believe it or not, but it was very different. But I hear we're not going to be as lucky this year.
Well, I didn't want to get into the global warming, but that amazes me because I was expecting that you'd be like knee deep in snow. But here we are, Rich. We're going to break for a commercial, and we want to thank our sponsors, but I am so looking forward to getting back to who you are and what you do after the break. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in. I want to thank my sponsors, Connor Dental and Associates, for making it possible for myself and Rich to be before you today.
Connor Dental Associates, full-service dentistry, providing orthodontics, implants, laser dentistry, and general care, set in a calm and relaxing environment. Our experienced dentist and staff are here to maintain your dental health, improve your appearance and quality of life. Compassionate, professional, and informative. Ask about our core whitening system, servicing insured and non-insured patients of all ages. Located in Kennesaw, near I-75. Call today and experience the difference for yourself.
Welcome back. My name is Yvette Pegues, and once again, thanks to our sponsors and thanks to our listeners and watchers and obviously our guest on the phone, Mr. Rich Luby, and his company is called Talk the Walk Disability and Inclusion Consulting. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's for hiring and training for the disability community.
So tell us a little bit about that before we go into more details and how to reach you, because I don't want that to get lost in all the great information that's coming next.
No, absolutely. The goal of Talk the Walk is to assist not only individuals, companies, but communities to be more inclusive. One of the main keys is within employment, there are so many either underutilized, underemployed, or unemployed individuals among the disability community. So my goal is to work with organizations, corporations, to identify qualified candidate pools for their open roles. For many years, it was a good charitable thing to hire somebody with a disability.
Right.
It was a feel-good thing. And now more and more studies and more companies are starting to realize that it's not just a real good feel-good thing. It is, but it's a smart business move.
It
because
is.
It actually not only is charitable, but it drives home your business drivers in so many different levels. And where I come in is I want to work with a company to help break down those employment stigmas, those barriers, and build an internal culture of acceptance for all and building hiring initiatives for companies. That starts with training and getting companies ready to promote and accept this change, and then finding qualified candidate pools within different regions of the country to be onboarded as part of their workforce.
I love that. Because there are organizations that do that as well, and we'll delve into that briefly. But before we move on to the next topic, tell us how we can reach you, Rich.
Oh, absolutely. So it is Talk the Walk Disability Inclusion Consulting Service, and I have a website, ttwinfo.com. It's ttwinfo.com, and all my contact information is on there. I'm also on Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn.
Perfect. And we'll have that information on screen for you, as well as through some of the postings that we'll be doing post-production. But let's talk about something that you mentioned. So before the break, we talked about Little Rich and school. But how did you now transition as an adult with these abilities into someone advocating? I mean, I get that you get it, but I like the name Talk the Walk, because we're all told to kind of be the world we want to see, and we don't take it as seriously as you have. So tell us how you made that transition.
Well, absolutely. There's two answers I want to give here.
Okay.
The way I made the transition is, once again, kind of going back, realizing that I wanted to be an advocate for the disability community. I found myself early on as an employment specialist at an agency, working face-to-face with clients, understanding their strengths and enhancing their weaknesses to help them find competitive employment. I gravitated to that role, and one of the responsibilities in that role was job developing, so developing relationships with companies in that area to hire these individuals.
Okay.
I did it so well at that the company at the time that I was with promoted me in less than a year and then created a position called Business Outreach Specialist. That was where I represented the company, and as we went into new locations or had new programs, I would be the spokesperson for that company, kind of building those bridges, those relationships to understand the services that we provide. I then, in my last role, was the Director of Partnership Development for an organization where I assisted and helped them develop a consulting arm of their own company around the same realm, and then would work with companies and develop hiring initiatives for agencies throughout the nation. And the way that I made the jump is I loved what I did, and I got great exposure and experience, but I realized that we weren't doing it in our own backyard. And at the time, that's what kind of made me make the jump. That I met so many great individuals, other consultants saying that, there's a need in this specific area, and so that's when I took the opportunity to do so.
So I love that you do that. Are there other competing organizations or partner organizations that you work with?
Yeah, what's funny is you would like to say in a nonprofit world or in the disability community, no, we're all together, and I would love that. But it's not like that. Yeah, there are competing agencies, and specifically because one of the driving forces behind these consulting services popping up is there are federal regulations now. Are you familiar with the 503 and 4212 regulations?
I am.
Yes, and so to your viewers and listeners, if you're a federally contracted company with the government, and I believe it's as little as $10,000 a year from the government a year, you are now considered a federal contracted company. You have hiring benchmarks for your organization, and that 7% of your workforce has to be considered disabled, and then it was a 9%, I believe it dropped down to 8%, has to be considered veterans with service-related disabilities.
Right.
So now it's a compliance piece, and it's not this 15% within a specific role, like janitorial services. It's throughout your organization. It's from front line to executive level. And so these big companies, to keep these contracts and to stay compliant, are now striving for it. So it kind of opened up the floodgates and the opportunity to really say, hey, this is something that you have to do now. So
I love that you said that, because big business can sometimes see all of the reasonable accommodations as a nuisance, as overhead, as money they have to now put into their organization. But what you're saying, that by law, it's not just required, but there are rebates. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes, and here's the thing, and I say this because it's a good conversation starter, but when I go to businesses, I don't ever lead with the compliance piece, because there are already so many compliance issues. Companies almost think of that as a turnoff. Yeah, we have to do it, but I don't want to be forced to do something.
Right.
What I like to discuss is that the business drivers behind it are so great. So within the disability community, you have higher retention rates with people with disabilities, which means lower turnover, higher production rates at times within the disability community. Also, the buying power within the disability community is around, I believe, $2 billion.
It is.
So it's smart for an organization to align themselves that we celebrate and accept individuals of all abilities, because it helps not only save money when it comes to lower onboarding, as I discussed, lower turnover saves money because you're not onboarding. You're also selling to a whole other untapped customer base.
Right.
There are so many different aspects that a company could see, yeah, I'm actually not losing money here, I'm creating a whole other revenue market.
So it's really corporate speak. I mean, you're bringing forth the positive, just like you said, with your own abilities. right? Rather than saying I'm a person with cerebral palsy and these are all my disabilities, it seems like you're approaching the corporate world in the same way. It is what it is, but let me bring to you the benefits and the great rewards that don't just come from a federal place, but individually and independently. And I really love that you do that, because you're celebrating and welcoming and providing a privilege, if you will, in this new market that a few companies have not embraced. Now, what I'd like to speak with you about briefly is, how do you feel about diversity of thought compared to physical and maybe positional disability? For example, someone with a identified disability or a veteran status, as opposed to diversity of thought based on where you lived and what you experienced in that lifetime, having to do with a disability instead of aligning it with a person.
And so if I understand the question, you're saying, how do I feel about, kind of selling this approach to companies in terms of the physical disability behind the hidden disability?
Yes, and the diversity of thought almost encompassing a group of people. So rather than presenting to them, hey, I'm going to bring you a workforce with disabilities, rather come to them and say, imagine, if you will, diversity of thought. That includes someone who may have had a childhood, or like yourself, who may have had many surgeries and is now the person that he is today because of what was previously described as a disability.
Yeah, see, I love that question as well, because let's be realistic here. Whether it's corporation or not, individuals who are not around a certain something or are not knowledgeable of a certain topic, they usually run to fear, fear of the unknown. And so one of the goals with any initiative that I assist in is, and this is the reason why I call it Talk the Walk, is you want to approach a client and showcase and talk about this issue or these barriers, and educate people on the abilities behind somebody with a disability, whether it be hidden disability or not. And I'll kind of get to this. So many times hiring managers or companies will say, well, I want to do this, but I don't know how I would manage somebody with a disability. And internally I laugh, because the reality is, you are already managing somebody with a disability. Exactly. You may just not know it yet.
Exactly.
So nothing changes. The goal is to educate them on let's see, anxiety, depression is considered a disability. Diabetes is actually considered a disability.
That's right.
So it's just having people understand the definition of a disability, the abilities behind that disability once again, and talking through these things, talking through this approach, and educating the current workforce and celebrating. That's why it's called Talk the Walk before you walk the walk, understanding what can be done and how you do it. So a lot of times also, initiatives live and die with the workforce already included.
Right.
And what I mean by that is, let's say all intentions are well and you want to do a hiring initiative. Most of the time it will be unsuccessful if you don't prepare your staff and give them the resources to have this initiative excel. So I always would love to go into a company, provide resources for their ERG groups, just their employment staff in general, to get that culture closer to acceptance for all. So that way an initiative not only succeeds in that spot or that company's office, but then it can spider out.
Of course, and it just makes, it's almost like a ripple effect, because it can only grow once they get past some of those initial barriers. You're right, it grows into something really beautiful, and I love that you're doing that in Connecticut. But when are you going to expand, come down to Atlanta and different parts of the country? Let's talk about that.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be on your show, and that's one of the goals. I'm looking to travel. I'm looking to be a collaborative partner in this. My goal is to come into an organization and provide the resources and hand them over a toolkit so that I could walk away and they could self-sustain these initiatives and these movements. I want to be there to help bridge the gap with local nonprofits where they could find these qualified candidates, these universities, and then I could step away and come in as needed. So I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully I can have my next phone call with you or shall I say not phone call, interview with you face to face.
I think that would be great. We definitely have to work on that off camera. And as I say off camera, I say it with a heavy heart because we're coming to the close of Disability Life TV in this particular episode. So what I'd like you to do, if you will, for me, Rich, is help me with something we do at the end of every show. It's called a D-Life Diamond. Are you familiar with that?
No, could you say it again? I'm sorry.
It's a D-Life Diamond. I'd like for you to give us some kind of sparkle, some kind of jewel, if you will, to close out the show based on your particular experiences and what you'd like our viewers to leave with.
Absolutely. A little while back, I wrote a LinkedIn blog, and it was called The Definition of Success. Okay? And I think that this is going to be beneficial to people with a disability or not. Many times, society defines success for us, okay? But the reality is success is personalized. And success for certain goals might take a little while. But at times, sadly, some people set these goals that are unrealistic. So the thing I want to leave with everybody is this. You can attain anything you want, but you have to set reasonable, realistic, small benchmarks. Once you accomplish those, I want you to celebrate those benchmarks so that keeps you motivated to move forward to your ultimate goal.
Got it. I love that. So basically, celebrating your abilities and preparing for diversity of workforce, diversity of thought, and the diversity of the world that we already live in.
100%.
Well, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. I really look forward to a live interview with you and seeing you nearby because we need what you do, who you are, and how you support and serve the community of disability with a capital A. So thank you for being on the show today, Rich. We will definitely be in touch, and I thank you all for watching.
Thank you for the time.